Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to be with you today, especially for those of you tuning in as part of your master's program in NGO management. Welcome to week 2. So today we're unpacking the really complex mechanics of how non-governmental organizations are, actually steered, governed, and held accountable in the real world. We're looking way beyond just the passion and the mission. We're looking at the structural engine that keeps these organizations running, or, well, sometimes causes them to completely break down. I want you to think about this for a second. What do you actually do when your donors, the folks holding the purse strings, right, have expectations that completely clash with the urgent, on-the-ground needs of the communities you're trying to serve? It's a crazy scenario, but it plays out literally every single day in the nonprofit sector. Because NGO governance isn't just some static set of rules sitting in a dusty binder somewhere. No, it's a high-stakes balancing act of competing tensions, power dynamics, and really messy human relationships. And honestly, as future leaders in this space, navigating this exact tension is going to be your primary job. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our syllabus for today. We're going to look at governance versus management, unpack board fiduciary duties, explore board executive relationships, break down the different dimensions of accountability, touch on ethics and transparency, and then finally wrap up with some global governance challenges. All right, moving right along to Section 1, Governance versus Management. Think of this as steering versus rowing. Let's establish the fundamental difference between these two roles. As future leaders, this anatomical metaphor is absolutely crucial for you to grasp. So, think of governance, which is typically your board of directors, as the brain. The board ensures the organization has a crystal clear mission, they steer the overall strategy, and they oversee performance. They are not supposed to be in the weeds doing the day-to-day work. Management, on the other hand, which is led by the executive director or CEO, well, that's the muscle. It's a staff function. They're focused on daily operations and actually implementing the board's strategy. So the board steers and management rows. When the brain tries to do the muscle's job, or vice versa, well, the entire body just falls out of sync. Section 2, Board Fiduciary Duties. This is the legal anchor. Okay, these duties basically act as the legal foundation for the whole organization. There's this landmark precedent, the Sibley Hospital case, which legally solidified exactly what a board is on the hook for, boiling it down to 3 non-negotiable fiduciary duties. First up is the duty of care. Now, this literally means board members have to pay attention. They can't just be a name on a letterhead. They must read the documents, actually show up to meetings, and exercise real due diligence when monitoring the finances. Second is the duty of loyalty. A board member absolutely must put the NGO's interests way above their own personal or professional gain. And third, the duty of obedience, which means making sure the organization complies with the law and stays true to its core mission. If a board member fails in any of these, they aren't just being unhelpful, they are legally negligent. Moving to Section 3, Board Executive Relationships. This brings in the human element. Now, what's really interesting about this is how we transition from those dry legalities into the actual, often messy, human elements. There is an inherent danger here. When roles aren't clearly defined, you get this wild pendulum swing. On one end of the spectrum, you have the board micromanaging the executive, which just stifles innovation and honestly drives the CEO completely crazy. But on the other extreme, the board goes totally hands-off. They act merely as a rubber stamp, leaving all the heavy responsibility and all the risk squarely on the shoulders of the CEO. You really have to actively balance strong oversight with executive autonomy. Let's actually slow down for a second and look at a real-world cautionary tale. Take the Eagle Forum dispute. This was a conservative U.S. nonprofit founded by Phyllis Schlafly, and back in 2016, it suffered a massive, highly public breakdown. Basically, high-ranking staff in the board found themselves completely misaligned over presidential endorsements. Some were backing Ted Cruz, others Donald Trump. It got so heated that the board attempted to oust the president, arguing these political positions were actually jeopardizing their tax-exempt status. The whole shebang ended up in the courts. The big takeaway for us here: when the board-executive relationship breaks down and leaks out into these public spats, it instantly torpedoes the organization's credibility and just breeds this toxic culture of internal distrust. And this brilliantly illustrates that exact dynamic. It's the governance system matrix. Basically, if you have poor governance and poor implementation, you're down there as strugglers. If you have a highly professionalized board but terrible execution on the ground, well, then you're structured strugglers. Conversely, if you've got great staff but a totally ineffective board, that makes you ad hoc achievers. To reach that magic top right quadrant, to be the exemplars, you absolutely must balance a highly professional governance system with highly professional implementation. You need a strong brain and strong muscle working together. All right, Section 4, Dimensions of NGO Accountability. Let's map the web. You can think of accountability as essentially the immune system that keeps an organization healthy while it's dealing with 360-degree pressures. Because unlike a traditional business that pretty much just answers to its shareholders, NGOs have to navigate this incredibly complex web of expectations. You've got bureaucratic accountability, where you're answering to funders and boards. You have legal accountability, which is strictly following the laws of the countries you operate in. Professional accountability means adhering to industry codes of ethics. Then there's political accountability, which is all about being responsive to a massive variety of different stakeholders. And finally, moral and ethical accountability, which is your overarching duty to pursue the general welfare. So you don't just have one boss, you've got a whole matrix of them. And naturally, this creates a profound tension between what we call upward and downward accountability. Upward accountability is all about answering to your donors. Downward accountability, that's answering to your beneficiaries, the people you're actually helping. There was this really fascinating survey by Van Zyl and colleagues looking at South African NGOs, and they found a distinct split here. Local NGOs were so much better at downward accountability. They stayed deeply connected to the actual immediate needs of the people they served. Meanwhile, large international NGOs claimed to perform better with upward accountability, focusing heavily on satisfying those Western donors. For an NGO, balancing both of these is basically the holy grail. On to Section 5. Ethics, transparency, and conflicts. This is your organizational shield. These ethical mechanisms literally form an organizational shield that protects public trust. If you want to see what radical transparency actually looks like in practice, check out the international NGO LifeWater. Yes, they have top charity ratings and they publish 5 years of audited financials, which is great. But what really sets them apart is that they share real-time results online, and get this, that includes their failures. When something doesn't work out as planned, they don't hide it. They own it, they speak directly to their donors about it, and they show exactly what they learned from the experience. Taking ownership of mistakes like that doesn't scare donors away, it actually builds immense confidence in your leadership. Now, to protect that hard-earned trust, a conflict of interest policy is absolutely vital. Think about it. Without strictly enforcing this kind of internal standard, an NGO risks breeding a culture of mistrust from the inside out. This policy requires everyone, from the board all the way down to volunteers, to formally disclose any actual or even perceived conflicts of interest. Without it, you open the door to decisions being made for personal gain rather than actually serving the public interest. As a future NGO manager, enforcing this, totally non-negotiable. Okay, bringing us to our final section. Section 6, Global NGO Governance Challenges, How We Adapt to Reality. So, the crucial point is, how do these clean, pristine corporate governance frameworks actually apply in informal, international contexts? Well, the reality is incredibly messy. Take a place like Tanzania, for example. The power relations between Western donors and local beneficiaries there are intensely complex. Robust local government structures are often lacking, but not because people don't want them. It's largely because fundamental legal and policy documents are frequently drafted in English. This creates a massive language barrier for grassroots organizers who might speak Swahili or other local dialects. And that naturally leads to misinterpretations of regulatory requirements and really strains overall effectiveness. On top of that, since the early 1980s, the privatization of social services has massively favored NGO funding. To put this into perspective, today, the budgets of some Western NGOs literally outweigh those of the United Nations agencies. Crazy, right? But it's true. And as international NGOs gain this kind of massive financial power, the allure of that money skyrockets, and consequently, so does the strict demand from donors for really rigid Western-style accounting procedures. The friction between these global, top-down accounting standards and the actual grassroots realities on the ground is arguably one of the defining challenges of modern development. Which brings us right back to where we started. I want to leave you with this hard-hitting question to chew on for the rest of week 2. When donor expectations fundamentally conflict with beneficiary needs, to whom is your NGO ultimately accountable? Are you serving the people who write the checks, or the people your organization was founded to help? Navigating that exact tension is the true art of NGO governance. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Good luck with your studies this week, and I'll see you next time.